This is Geek Gab with your host, Dornall, and me, Daddy Warpig. We are back. Geek Gab for Saturday, June 29th, 2019. We are coming at you live from the internet, from Google Hangouts, which will shortly be going away. And so we're going to have to perform an emergency switch to some other broadcast method. Now, I want to reassure you, because I know that you are used to, that you have built up a fondness for the technical issues that plague every single episode of this podcast, thanks primarily to Google Hangouts. And I know that when I tell you that Google Hangouts is going away, you feel bereft, maybe even panicked, that you are not going to get your weekly dose of technical errors. So I just want to reassure you that there is no doubt in my mind that whatever gremlins have infested Google Hangouts for the last 4 years of the show will undoubtedly follow us to whatever platform we move to, and that you, our audience, can expect the same hapless high quality that you have gotten in the past. The quality of this show will not diminish. Having said that, Dornall, how was your week?
Hey man, my week has been pretty rough. I'm on call at work. But you made me think about those gremlins, those technical problem gremlins. What if, hear me out, what if the Geek Gab is a spiritual ritual for us and our listeners, where we get to purge that accumulated negative energy, those gremlins. We get to purge those technical difficulties so that we may have a successful and glorious week. What do you think?
So you're saying that just by listening to Geek Gab, folks ensure that the rest of their week is peaceful and trouble-free?
That's the ticket.
I believe you. I think that is eminently sensible. Now, I've got a question. When you say you're on call, I've been watching Scrubs again. Okay, sue me. I like Scrubs.
It's a good show.
When you say you're on call, I'm presuming you're not on call like doctors are on call.
Right. Not quite the same. It's similar. It just means that if I don't have to be at the office, but if something comes up where our service, which is running 24 hours a day, if the service goes down, I'm the guy who needs to bring it back up. So that's all it means. It just means that I'm the emergency contact for some stupid software sitting in a data center somewhere.
Now, I'm only laughing because of two things. One, I have been in close proximity to 3 of those events myself on major internet services. I was there the day that AOL went down for the significant length of time, and they were scrambling to try and fix it, and we got called just a million billion times. And I'm also the guy who crashed eBay twice.
How did you do that?
They had an aging database software at the core of the site, literally the original software that was written to store and process auctions and stuff. And in order to get around certain restrictions and some processes, I used the software in ways that were not anticipated by the original creator. In ways that brought it to a screeching halt and caused an outage on eBay.
That's amazing.
So I'm not saying I caused all the technical issues on Geek Gab, but I am saying that if you were collecting evidence, that you would find plenty of evidence that I have jinxed large scale online.
I think that's part of the reason why we don't use webcams on this show, is so that the audience can't see the dark cloud hanging over your desk.
The demons running back and forth in the background. Why don't we invite our guest to say something?
Our guest doesn't really need much of an introduction. He's been a good friend of the show and been on a few times. It's Alexander from Cirsova magazine. Welcome back, bro.
Hey, everybody. Good to be here.
So, welcome to your weekly ritual of cleansing technical difficulties. So, I hope that the rest of your week has been difficulty-free.
It's been a pretty good week, yeah.
Now, we were talking before the show. I was saying I'm out of the loop as usual. I know that makes me an amazing host, but I just found out the other day about this cool thing that you're producing. I even went up and looked cool photos on it that I might use as our thumbnail for the show, so that people know what they get when they're clicking on. And I saw an illustration of a guy like an Indiana Jones style adventurer with a revolver pointing it at a couple of dinosaurs like raptors. And so that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
See, that just already makes me want to read it.
Right? I just flipping through these photos and I see, yeah, cool fantasy stuff. All right. Indiana Jones fighting off hungry dinosaurs. All right, I'm in. What is going on with you? Is it space dinosaurs too?
Yeah, they are a alien race of dinosaurs known as griefs. They are kind of like Tyrannosaurus rexes, only they have the ability to camouflage themselves, turn invisible, and they have empathic and mild telepathic powers, which become quite a problem when they get their hands on a piece of alien technology that's meant to speed up certain evolutionary paths to prepare the way for invasions by a particular alien race known as the Marzanti.
What on? I only understood about a third of that.
It's pretty gonzo. Like I said, you have to go to stuff like Gardner F. Fox with the scope of Jack Kirby's Fourth World type stuff to get anything even remotely comparable to the world and setting of Wild Stars.
Wild Stars. Who writes that?
Michael Tierney. He is the owner and proprietor of the two main comic book stores here in Little Rock. He's got one in Little Rock and in North Little Rock. The one in Little Rock is also celebrating an anniversary this year, this June. It will have been open for 30 years. And he has been working on the Wild Stars for the better part of 40 and then some, but he tracks the anniversary, the 35th anniversary, to the first official publication, which was the Ehrlich comic, which was a black and white indie comic from the black and white boom. That one came out in '84.
Holy cow. That's amazing that he's been doing that for 40 years. Is it one of those things where it's like this guy's D&D setting or whatever, or is it something that...
It's just really his passion. I mean, he's been working on it for ages. The early Wild Stars comics are actually adaptations of books that he wrote back during the 70s pulp revolution. Those books ended up not being picked up by editors, so he decided he would adapt them himself into comics, and that's where the 1984 Ehrlich comic and the 1988 First Marker comic have their origins as adaptations of previously unpublished novels.
Wow. This is becoming a thing for you, isn't it? You've been scouring IPs for unpublished works that you can get back out there.
To an extent, yeah. We recently did the Lee Brackett Stark project that's been coming out this summer. That's been a lot of fun. We put out 3 volumes in the form of like Japanese light novels with illustrations by Star 2, and each volume had forwards. One was by Nathan Housley, the pulp archivist. We had one that had a forward by Jeffro Johnson, who everybody here knows, and the most recent one that came out, Black Amazon of Mars, had a forward by Liana Kersner.
Oh, that's amazing. So that's a fascinating backstory on Wild Stars. Tell me about your role in it.
Well, it kind of got started a couple of years ago when I first started doing Cirsova. I'd been talking more with Michael because he was one of the local businesses and wanted to see if he was interested in just filling up some free ad space in that first issue. And he's like, yeah, sure. And when he actually saw how awesome the first issue was, he kind of wanted in on it. And so we ended up buying a couple of his stories. The first story of his that we bought was Shark Fighter. And
sorry to interrupt. I love that name.
Yeah.
Is everything he writes that awesome?
Yeah. Not all of it is the sort of stuff that Cirsova would run with. He writes some stuff that's a little bit spoofy. We actually did run one or two of his like sort of little drawl pieces in a couple issues, but he does a lot of stuff that's gonzo science fiction and just weird, cool stuff too. But anyway, we kind of got our publishing history established with him when we published Shark Fighter, and then in 2017 when we published his Bears of 1812 story, which is about Sacagawea, the bears that Lewis and Clark brought back to the White House, and the ensuing supernatural disaster that having bears taken from the American West brought upon our land. And in 2018, he asked me if I would be willing to do sort of a special release because he finally started working on his Wild Stars stuff again. And that was Wild Stars 3, Time Warmageddon, which was the novella that we released last summer.
And you did was it an Indiegogo or a Kickstarter for that?
We did a Kickstarter for that one. Part of what we did with that was use that as a way to clear out some of the vaults of some of his older Wild Stars stuff. He jokes about how that was one of the best sales of his Multiversal Scribe, which was a fanzine that he put out from the 70s. And he wasn't able to really get much distribution on it the first go because he ended up having to move. So he kind of lost his audience then when he moved. So we got a bunch of those into people's hands, as well as the new Wild Stars story.
Because see, I paid for the whatever the ultra deluxe level was that got me one copy of everything. I was like,
did you get your copy of everything?
Yeah, I do. I've got it sitting on the bookshelf behind
me.
I was like, look, if I'm going to read one thing in this series, I want to start and read all of it. So
yeah,
I was in for that. And it's awesome too because it's written books and comics. And has he done anything else at any other?
He's outside of the Wild Stars. His latest big productions were the 100-year Edgar Rice Burroughs art chronology through Chenal and Gray, which is another local Little Rock publishing house. It is 4 monstrous hardcover volumes that have reprints of just every scrap of art associated with Edgar Rice Burroughs properties, all the way back from his earliest pulp appearances up to the last couple of years of the stuff that's been coming out in comics, like the Dynamite Comics stuff, everything. I mean, there is nothing like this out there. There's the largest collection and republication of extant Edgar Rice Burroughs artwork out there on the market. And while working on that project, that's sort of what led to us ending up publishing Young Tarzan and the Mysterious She back in our spring issue this year, because Michael kind of had an in with the estate from working with them. And plus, he'd had this scrap lying around for several years that Danton Burroughs had sent him to finish. It was an unpublished, unfinished fragment from the Jungle Tales era, and he said, well, since I'm kind of hot off the heels of doing this one Tarzan project, what do you think of this thing that I've been working on? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got to get my hands on this. What'll it take to get my hands on this? And that's how we ended up working to publish Young Tarzan and the Mysterious She by Edgar Rice Burroughs and Michael Tierney in our spring issue, with that fabulous, fabulous cover by Anton Oxenuk.
Let me ask a question. Does he have still any of those back issues and stuff that you're going to be offering, or that you would be offering on this Indiegogo?
Yeah. He's still got a small handful left of the comics from the 80s. We moved a lot of those in our last Kickstarter, but we're making a few of the last of those available. We're making a few of the Multiversal Scribe that he still has copies of available. We are making available the 01-02 comic run. And just so people know, the 80s comics and the 01-02 comic run are what make up Wild Stars Book 1, Book of Circles, which we are reprinting in the new edition. We are also clearing out the handful that we have left of the first printing of Time Warmageddon, because unlike what we normally do, we just did a one-off printing of those and kind of struck the plates at the end. So all that Michael had in his store is all that's left. But we're making a few of those available through this for anybody who wanted the first printing that had the cover by Tim Lim and the Spider cover by Mark Wheatley, and also a few of the hard covers that are left. We're making a few of those available. Now, the difference between this printing and the printing from last year of Time Warmageddon, this is going to have a new cover by Mark Wheatley. It's going to have the two Wild Stars short stories that Michael published with us in Cirsova, Bears of 1812 and Shark Fighter, and it's also going to have a new, previously unpublished Wild Stars story, The Grim Grip.
Sounds cool.
I love these names. I can't get over these names. This is, you know what this reminds me of? Those stupid internet jokes where someone tries to say, wow, ninjas, pirates, LOL random sort of thing. Only this guy's been doing it for 40 years. It's actually original. He's really just putting wacky stuff together, and it sticks.
Yeah. And we've talked about some of the cool and crazy wild things that the Wild Stars have in it, but the central premise is that Earth is only now returning to its previous spacefaring era. There had been previous spacefaring eras of Earth before, and the Wild Stars were led by an immortal being who's only remembered as the Ancient Warrior because his name is lost. He was from another universe that was destroyed. He came to our universe. He ended up gathering together some of the scattered remnants of humanity, and they led one of the last exoduses from Earth to the stars 75,000 years ago, right at the fall of Atlantis, right as an alien invasion was about to destroy Earth. These fishmen from outer space had sent this weapon down that would spark the evolution of the fish and the horrible monsters of the deep to create these sort of monstrous fish creatures that would become the dominant sentient race on Earth. And so before that could happen, the Ancient Warrior took with him a bunch of the humans into space, and those space colonists became the Wild Stars. And so you have the spacefaring humans who've colonized worlds. they've got their own wars, both with the Fishmen and with this race of wolfmen known as the Brothan. And the first Wild Stars book, the one that the comics assemble to tell, is about how around the same time that Earth is finally going to make contact again with the humans who made the Exodus, a race of wolfmen have teamed up with one of the renegade Wild Stars. They're going to destroy Earth. They're going to launch a comet into Jupiter. They're going to turn it into another sun. It's going to explode. It's going to destroy the Earth. And while you have all that going on, you also have alternate timeline Nazis.
Of course, necessary.
Yeah, of course, you have to have alternate timeline Nazis. You have to have the alternate universe son of Adolf Hitler trying to help these space werewolf men and this renegade Wild Stars destroy this Earth as punishment for the collapse of their timeline.
Wow. Our villains aren't evil enough. We need to bring back the Nazis. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Love it. Oh,
and so
go ahead.
So this the newest book, Wild Star Rising, is both a prequel and a sequel to the previous Wild Stars adventures, because this is the first time that it actually looks back the 75,000 years into the past to the Exodus and the fall of Atlantis. But it also looks forward to where the ancient warrior is finally able to execute his plan to try to rescue his beloved from her prison at the center of a supermassive black hole. And so he brings a sailor from ancient Earth with him into space forward in time. Like, look, you're a great sailor, so you're going to help me sail the stars and pilot this thing into the heart of a black hole so we can rescue my love. So that's the news story right there.
I tell you what, I wish I had the guts to write crazy stuff like that. That's insane.
Yeah.
Like the pitch, hey, I just dreamt this really weird, like when a friend tells you about a weird dream, and you go, yeah, all right, that was a weird dream, yeah, don't tell me that ever again. And he just goes, screw it, let's put it on paper. This is awesome.
Yeah, and you'll be able to get the entirety of that dream, 700 pages in a gorgeous coffee table hardcover, where it's going to have cover by Anton Oxenuk, who anybody who's familiar with the last several issues of Cirsova knows just how awesome his stuff is.
And is that the one that you've got on the Indiegogo right there?
Those are by Mark Wheatley.
Okay.
Those are the one with the shark is going to be the cover of the volume 1, and the one with the guy with the gun at the dinosaurs is going to be volume 2.
Okay. That's amazing. I'm loving all this artwork that you've picked up here.
Yeah, and speaking of artwork, we've got some 4-color prints that we've made of the dinosaur eating the pirate queen from book 3, and the time travelers fighting from book 3 as well. Those are both by Mark Wheatley. The time traveler battle this is the first time it's been offered in color. It was one of the black and white illustrations, but we didn't use it for a cover. The Red Grief eating the pirate queen was the back cover of the version that had the Tim Lim cover on the front.
Okay. Yeah, Tim Lim's got that distinctive artwork. He's a comics guy. He did the Thump, the President Rabbit thing. That's really cool. So how did you get together all these great artists to do these covers?
A lot of it has been Michael.
Okay.
Because when we did Wild Stars 3 last year, Michael said he'd take care of the art and stuff, and I was sort of working for just doing the Kickstarter, making sure all the layout was done, getting promotion. And so the way I got paid was we did a split $66.33 on whatever I could make off the Kickstarter, and he got the lion's share to help pay for the art from Mark Wheatley, and we're doing something similar to that again.
Great.
But he's been in the comics industry for so long, and he has so many connections. He could get some pretty big name folks on the horn, which is one of the reasons why we have Mark Wheatley working on this. And Tim Lim, for us, is a hometown hero. We both shop at the same comic store. He'd been shopping at Michael's comic store before he even was thinking about doing comic stuff. So he's known Michael forever.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I had no idea he was a local guy.
Yeah. So I end up kind of meeting Tim through Michael's work.
Oh, that's cool. And that reminds me of, actually, I've got a question from the chat. We're going to go back into business. Raindrops in chat wants to know how well your Tarzan issue sold.
The Tarzan issue was probably one of our best-selling issues. I think we moved somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 copies.
Holy cow.
Yeah. Well, a big part of that was Michael also got a lot locally. We did the local signing event, and we sold almost all the ones that we had locally. Plus, the Burroughs estate wanted their own box to sell, and plus we had our own sales and stuff. So it did really well. It was kind of a loss leader for us because we're trying to adapt to the changes in print-on-demand indie publishing. Amazon getting rid of Create Space was just a huge blow, because Amazon it's cheaper to print through them than it is through Ingram Spark, but you can't have anything set up for pre-order through Amazon. The way it would work through Create Space is you could set your stuff up, and resellers could have access to it at a certain point, but you didn't have to make stuff be live on Amazon to sell it, which gave you a window to actually print up copies, mail them out, get them fulfilled, and then get them listed on Amazon. But we aren't able to do that anymore. Now, if you want to print something through Amazon, it's just, oh, are you ready to print? Well, bam, it's live on Amazon right here and now. And the fulfillment process is just way more tedious than it was through Create Space. So
Well, that's a shame. So what's the future of indie publishing right now?
Right now, I think it's, as much as I hate to say it, it's probably going to be a mix of getting stuff listed using Ingram Spark, using Amazon for your ebook stuff, and you're not going to be able to find any reliable one-stop shop for anything.
That's too bad. That's too bad. And is anybody else setting up their own press, such as Castalia House in Europe, or does Superversive do their own publishing, or do they use the Ingram Spark?
I don't know anything about their publishing methods.
Daddy Warpig talks to those guys all the time.
Are you asking me if I know what they do to publish books?
Yeah. Do they publish their own books, or are they just an imprint for indie publishing?
I have no idea.
All right, we don't know. Someone in the chat may tell us, but in the meantime, that's interesting. That's too bad.
One thing that I'm learning though is, they always talk about the 55%, like, oh, retailers will pick up your book if you mark it down 55% retail discount. No, they really won't. All that does is just eat into whatever profits you'd make, because Amazon and Barnes & Noble, they just pick up the content and will put out orders. They're not going to miss any money, and it doesn't cost them anything to list stuff on that Ingram Content Service provides. So give yourself as good a cut as you can. If all your sales are going to be coming through Amazon anyway, if you set a better retailer discount than the minimum that'll get you listed on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, you're just handing money to those corporations. So,
got it. It's funny you mentioned retailers. Brick and mortar retailers are in a really bad spot right now.
Yeah.
I was in a local bookstore that just opened up recently here in the great Pacific Northwest. And as kind of a troll and also to support my buddies, I tried to get some of my friends' books listed. So I asked, "Hey, can you stock steampunk books by John Delarose, for example?" And it turns out that they can't do any independent publishers. They can't do Amazon published stuff, print on demand, or anything. It turns out that even though it looks like an independent bookstore, it's basically limited to certain publishers that they can order from. Which I don't know what that tells you, but it tells me that nobody's put any faith in these sorts of services. If you can print on demand cheap enough to get it at a bookstore for a reasonable retail price, why wouldn't you stock it? Right?
Yeah. Well, and of course, there's the question of returnability, and it hasn't happened to me, but I've heard horror stories where some indie author like sets their retail price and said it is returnable, and the next thing they know, some stores bought a carton, dumped it, and they're at a loss for all those returned copies because nobody actually bought their book.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I guess that's a big part of the publisher model where they have
It's
to be able to,
dangerous.
yeah, they have to
And
eat
the
all those
thing
losses.
is Barnes and Noble. Barnes and Noble says that they'll get you listed if you jump through all the hoops. But part of the hoops is the 55% discount for retailers and returnable stock. And even then, there's no guarantee that they'll do any promotion for it. And it'll just sit there on a shelf. It'll rot and die. They'll send it back. You'll have lost the money. And they'll say, oh, well, your book didn't sell. Well, there's no reason to stock it anymore. There's no reason to stock the next one.
Oh yeah. That's
So,
awful. That's awful.
so right now, I think my advice to anybody who's doing indie and self-publishing, focus on Amazon and Barnes and Noble's web stores, build up your audience, sell stuff through there, get yourself as good a cut as you can.
Sounds good. That's a tough business.
It is.
How do you feel about it? I mean, is it something that you could even do as a day job?
I'm not someone who'd be a great person to ask for that because I'm nowhere close to be able to make it a day job. I'll just be happy when we're actually having a profitable year for a change.
That'd be nice.
Yeah.
But it's something that you love. It's not.
It is. I do it because it's a lot of fun. It's fun getting the stories out there. It's fun actually having a quality product to be like, look, this is something I made. This is something that I put out. And having people be like, oh, wow, yeah, that is really cool. I mean, there's sort of a validation element to it. And yeah, it would be amazing if it actually made some money for me. And I was able to get it to where it was self-sustaining. Self-sustaining right now is the big goal. And sometimes I think we're getting close. I think that if we could just, grow our readership a little bit more, get a little bit more people and sites to take notice of us and what we're doing, we could at least get to the point where the magazine is able to pay for itself.
So let me ask you a question. Are there structural issues preventing you from reaching a bigger audience?
There may be some structural issues, but there's also personal bandwidth. If you're spending all of your time actually doing the physical assembly of projects and the actual project management, that doesn't often leave you with enough time to devote to the necessary marketing and PR to actually grow that audience. So one of the things we're looking at doing is trying to bring someone in as a PR consultant or just a PR agent who can handle things like getting ARCs to people, getting press releases to people, just growing the exposure.
I have a follow-up question. Oh, our illustrious authors hanging out and chat with us now. But I wanted to ask, since the Geek Gab has transformed itself, you see, we are now a show about stuff we love. So, besides what you're doing with Cirsova magazine, or is there anything else about it that you are passionate about? What do you love?
I just love the stories. It's just so much fun reading the stories and bringing the stories to people. And that's actually Michael Tierney there in the chat. If you have any questions for Michael about Wild Stars.
Yeah, I mean, my main questions are where he comes up with this stuff. I know that's sort of a hackneyed interview question, but that's crazy. That stuff's so wild.
Yeah. I mean, and just being able to get a look at stuff like that, if I wasn't doing what I was doing, I wouldn't have been in the position that I was to be one of the first people to read a lost Tarzan story, much less publish it.
So there are other compensations besides monetary.
Oh yeah. It's fun. You get to meet and talk to a lot of people, and you get to actually see what's going on in sci-fi short fiction. There's a lot of really cool stuff going on right now that I think not a lot of people have heard about, in part because, reading is something that takes time. And it takes effort. It's not the same as sitting down just playing video games or watching TV or binging something on streaming. You actually have to take the time to sit down with something and commit to it. And there's so much good stuff out there, and I think that there are a lot of people who just don't take the time to commit to finding and experiencing what all is out there to enjoy. So I think in that regard, we do compete a lot with other forms of entertainment.
Oh, for sure. I think what kills it for reading, as enjoyable as it is, it can't deliver those dopamine hits that you get from stupid mobile games and your MMO Skinner boxes and so on.
Yeah, and when you do get them, it's because you've actually put the effort into it. Like if I'm reading Thomas Burnett Swan, I'll get that dopamine hit when a monster girl shows up. It's like, oh yeah, finally the monster girls are showing up. Cretan bear girls.
Here's the thing about brick and mortar, and the reason they're failing is pretty much the same reason that the comic industry direct market is failing. In fact, I think I've put together a couple of things listening to different authors over the last couple of years. And I want to tell you what the comic industry has done because it's so insane. And the book buying or the book selling industry does the same thing. Back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, they had romance and war comics, and they sold insanely well. It wasn't just superhero comics. They sold them to housewives. They sold them to, veterans of World War II and other people, adults. And they sold in, frankly, just insane numbers. And then a new generation of editors came along who only liked superhero comics and only wanted to focus on superhero comics, so they killed them all off. And so that huge revenue source went away. But they were still in like every single convenience store, every single grocery store, every single drugstore would have a spinner rack of comics. Kids could come in, pay a quarter, pull a comic off, read it, throw it away. They were intentionally disposable, and they were printed on the cheapest of newsprint. In fact, they began as a way to use up this cheap newsprint. So they were making a lot of money from there. But then they had a brilliant marketing idea. One female executive at Marvel had a brilliant marketing idea, and they called it the direct market, where instead of putting comics in every single store in the world so anybody could wander in if they were interested and pick up a superhero comic. They only sold to specialist comic shops. And so all of that other stuff in stores that I grew up with just went away. And so they lost all of those other customers, casual purchasers of comics who might have picked up, one comic a month or one comic every couple of months. All that money thrown out on top of all the other money already thrown out. And then because comic stores because comic stores were beholden to a few different distributors, the comic book writers, comic book editors got really, really lazy, and then they brought wokeness into it. And so comic sales cratered. And the more comic sales cratered, the more brick and mortar stores went out of business, thus making it nearly impossible to turn it around. So they have engaged in a 40-year campaign of throwing away customers, of throwing away money. And finally, we're at the point where they care more about wokeness than they do about making money. And as a result, everyone is suffering, because when brick and mortar goes, then that means the indies have a very hard time of selling. A shrinking market makes it harder for everyone to make money. And you look at comics, it's just whenever a genre or a specific field of endeavor, comic books or novels or movies or whatever, becomes known for crap, to where, instead of like 10 decent films and one true stinker, or however much, a healthy ratio is, as soon as it starts getting unhealthy to where most of it is crap, people stop reading, and you go down that spiral. And we have long since hit that with literature, science fiction literature in trad pub, science fiction and all this other stuff has long since hit that. So the only vital and growing and exploding success is on Amazon for what Nick Cole calls kind of trash. Because they pump it out in large quantities. People have a lot of fun reading it. And so the writers, if they can continue making a novel every month, everything's exciting. Readers will keep on reading it, and you can grow readership that way. Whereas if you go to TradPub, you can't, because TradPub has systematically destroyed people's taste for traditionally published novels, because they know that the vast majority of them are trash. Not just bad, not just poorly written, not just bad stories, but actually insulting, condescending, mean, snarky, debauched. And that's happening to TradPub, it's happening to magazines, it's happening to comic books, and things are coming to a head for a lot of those all at the same time, it seems.
Yeah, it's a tough market, and you're also seeing, of course, the trad pub eating itself with its big name authors, like the recent debacle where everyone's decided now it's all John Scalzi's fault that the Hugos are ruined. I don't know if
really?
you guys saw that.
I missed that. How did that happen?
The logic goes that John Scalzi tossing his hat in the ring for fan writer as a professional author some 10-odd years ago was a violation of the spirit of the awards in the fan category, and that eventually led to the Sad Puppies and Rapid Puppies, who were following the letter of the rules but violating the spirit of the fandom. And so now you have the woke people who are saying, yeah, it kind of is Scalzi's fault. We need better representation in fandom. You had Cameron Hurley with her big to-do over it.
If I were a cynical man, I would say that they just found the excuse they needed to unperson, or they don't say unperson now, they say cancel, to cancel John Scalzi.
Yeah, and you'd be hard pressed to find a guy who was more one of us than John Scalzi in the trad pub world.
Well, he's had plenty of success, so I don't shed a single tear for whatever happens to him now.
I think
Go ahead.
it's just a lot harder on indies, on small people to grow big because there's so much junk in the way that it's hard for people. At the same time, the number of people publishing books and other things has exploded. And so where it used to be that you were a needle in a haystack to be an author, published under TradPub, let's say in the 50s or 60s, you were a needle in a haystack. Nowadays, you're like one needle in 100 million haystacks.
Yeah, and hard. One of the biggest issues that's happening now in indie pub is that Amazon has changed the way things work again. Everybody finally thought they figured out the magic spell of how to work the algorithm and make it work, and then Amazon went and changed it on everybody. Now there's almost no promotion of books that's not from sponsored books. You hardly ever see any of the whole customers who bought this also bought this, or customers who viewed this also viewed this. You hardly ever see any of that organically anymore. We've had titles that have broken into the top 100 of their categories, but we've never seen that boost of the alleged algorithm finally kicking in the way it's supposed to, the way that it did just a couple of years ago for some people.
That's short-term thinking on Amazon's part, because you're instead of going for sales on books, you're going for ad money. And that's short-term thinking.
You're having to also compete with Amazon's own publishing houses now, because they've got several of their own imprints in every conceivable genre category. So it's a tough time. The market is there in a way that it's never been before, but it's starting to contract in certain ways as the business models, I think, are changing for the worse.
Yeah, it's gonna take a while, but the Amazon's gonna be the 300-pound gorilla for a while. It's clear that Bezos's intent, I should say, is that Amazon be the one place where you go to shop for everything.
Yeah.
And it's going to collapse under its own weight, I hope, if it doesn't catch the ire of any governing bodies who may actually have the power to break it up. But I don't see the will to do that yet. So it's something that we're going to have to deal with, no matter what you're selling. Any sort of retail business, you're going to have to deal with it. Yeah.
Amazon as a marketplace is one thing, but as Amazon becomes a creator and a retailer of its own products, which in a way is what happened when they decided to kill CreateSpace. They wanted it solidly under their own branding, and it gives them more control, but it also gave publishers and authors a lot less options, a lot less flexibility, and it doesn't feel like a serious publishing tool for people who are trying to handle it seriously as a business. They make it seem like the same as like listing your junk on eBay or listing your own junk on Amazon. It's, oh, you have a story, just fill out this form and upload it, and we'll dump it in the marketplace. It doesn't offer the necessary tools for people who have plans for what they want to do. Like, there's no way to roll out things, and there's no way to even be sure when you're able to get your book on release. Like, you have no control over the day. You can hit the on button, and some Poindexter behind a computer can say, oh, I found this thing, like the little dongles on the F are just a little bit too far off the margin, so you're going to have to resubmit the files. And by the way, since it was a weekend, you have to resubmit on Monday, and you're already 3 days behind on your release schedule. So things are getting harder, I think, for anyone who's serious about indie publishing and self-publishing. And it's a shame.
We're skating towards the end of the show, and this is going to be a big can of worms, so I just want to mention this without sparking a big discussion. As soon as Amazon becomes a notable publisher, in addition to being a marketplace, that has the potential to bring upon them a lot of scrutiny as far as antitrust goes. So,
yeah, it's going to be a while. Pardon the interruption. We've got our technical malfunction.
Oh, there we go. So let me ask a question. Do you have any ideas about how to get around Amazon? Amazon is making a lot of moves that seem to be in its best interest now, but which cause a lot of problems for sellers, and which may actually be not in Amazon's best interest in the long run. So is there any options or any strategies to get around their decisions on these areas?
I mean, the main thing to do would be to diversify platform-wise, except the problem with that is every platform that you try to diversify to, that's more effort that you have to make, and a lot of times it can be diminishing returns. One of the reasons why Smashwords fell in decline so much is, even though the conventional wisdom at one point was put your stuff everywhere, put it on Amazon, put it on Barnes & Noble, make sure it's on Smashwords. Smashwords had such low returns for people for the amount of effort that putting their stuff on another site had. And when Amazon started offering special deals for anyone who would exclusively distribute digital content through them, it just stopped making sense for a lot of people to use Smashwords, and so the conventional wisdom ceased being to diversify onto Smashwords and other platforms. But I think we may be heading towards where that becomes necessary again. And I wish that Ingram Spark was not so overpriced in what they had to offer. Like, they're one of the few places that has not only shipping and handling, they have a handling fee on top of that. So small orders become even more expensive, even though their per page rate is already more expensive than if you were printing through Amazon. So like one book, 100 pages through Amazon would cost $6, and that includes shipping. One book through Ingram Spark, shipped to one person, that's almost $10, including all their shipping and handling. But it does give you access to their content providing service, which does populate your stuff out to a number of platforms, which is something that Amazon and going exclusively through Amazon doesn't do. So it's devils all around. It's not 6 one, half a dozen another. There are just so many different things that you can do, but so many different ways that it can come back and bite you in ways that you may not expect. So it's really hard to find what works out there these days.
Let me make a prediction. The increasing complexity of the market means there's going to be a premium placed on people who can deal with that complexity. It's going to drive indie authors into recreating their own publishing houses, because they're going to need somebody who can manage the business, who can manage all this complexity, who can, every moment you spend learning about all this stuff is a moment that you're not writing or whatever. And so there was some virtues to the publishing system. You had people who were specialists in a lot of things that authors didn't themselves necessarily have to do. And so I think that as Amazon makes it harder and harder, sooner or later you're going to have to see some people deciding, you know what, I need someone who can just deal with this exclusively, and I'll, pay them a percentage or whatever. And you'll see some of that New York um, infrastructure start to be recreated because it'll be necessary.
Yeah. And the big thing that I think is going to be hard for anyone who's doing stuff independently is people who can handle the marketing and PR, because getting stuff in front of people is one of the hardest parts of doing any of this. Finding platforms, doing layouts, covers, connecting with writers, connecting with artists, all of that is easy compared to the marketing and sales end of making all of this work.
Let me ask you a question. When you do a search for something on Amazon, is it showing you the sponsored results and the non-sponsored results? Is it still showing you honest returns off the search engine, or is it kind of biasing search results towards its own publishing houses?
Just the very nature of sponsored search results means that the results are going to be biased, but there's not really any way of knowing just how biased the non-sponsored results are because of the sponsored results. I mean, you do a search for something now, you'll get the first 5, sometimes even a page of stuff that's just ad sponsors on Amazon and not what you're looking for. You can type in the exact name of what you're looking for, and you'll sometimes end up with stuff ahead of it in the sponsored results that's absolutely nothing what you're looking for.
Are the sponsored results at least on topic? I mean, if you do a search for like Space Marines, do the sponsored results, are they actually Space Marine books, or are they just pitching whatever?
Well, we can find out right quick. I'm on Amazon. I'm searching for Space Marines.
We only have a few minutes left. I guess that's an interesting experiment for the future, just to monitor to see if Amazon is actually harming consumers, harming sellers by serving them results that have nothing to do with what they want to read. That would be a big problem for both readers and writers.
Well, I just searched Space Marines. On the top bar, there is a list of 4 books that are lit RPG and not science fiction, apparently. They seem to be fantasy. And then the top 2 results are sponsored results below that. And then you finally get to Space Marines Warhammer toys.
Oh boy.
But in fairness, one of the 2 sponsored results is Warhammer Space Marines.
That's fair. That's fair.
But there are still 5 things listed that do not have that are not Space Marines.
It's a bit of a mix.
That's a terrible situation for Amazon, because it makes the site less useful and makes people less likely to use the site.
Yeah.
All right.
That's amazing. Yeah. I speaking of the business, I do want to wrap up with a comment from the author Michael Tierney, who's been hanging out in chat. He said he's been a direct market retailer for 38 years. He does fine because he doesn't rely on Marvel and DC. He says, quote, "I carry a monster back issue selection at both stores of the time-proven good stuff."
That's also been a trend I have heard about from commenters or people in the know. Is like stores that are succeeding are those who stock back issues that people actually want to read and buy.
Interesting.
In preference to the new stuff that's just awful. We are almost exactly out of time.
We're the best. That's why. That's the best. Alexander, anything else you want to talk about today?
I'm good. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a blast. Be sure to check out the Indiegogo. We need to try to move 100 sets.
You got it. We got your link in the description for anybody who's listening, checking it out on YouTube. Please check out that Indiegogo, at least for the amazing artwork that you guys put together. It's always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for hanging out, and
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
of course, thanks for hanging out in the chat, guys. Particularly the author, Michael Tierney. Thanks for hanging out with us today.
Is it my turn? Is it my turn? Is it my turn?
Daddy Warpig, it is your turn.
Alrighty. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks everybody who participated in the live chat. Thanks everybody in the future who will be listening to this show. By the way, those of you who are wondering where else you can listen to this show other than youtube.com/geekgab, that's youtube.com/geekgab. You can also get the show on the iTunes store, on the Google Play Store, and on SoundCloud.com. Subscribe to the show and consume at your leisure on the platform of your choice. We, your hosts, are leaving you for today, but don't you worry, don't you fret, we will be back.